Hey guys, Hop here. The Holosun IRIS was revealed at SHOT Show 2024, and almost a year later, after numerous delays, it is finally available for purchase, which is fantastic because I'm about to leave for SHOT Show 2025 in under a week. I think the delays did result in a better quality device, and Holosun still got to market faster than their two main competitors in the IR laser aiming module space, the EOTech OGL and the Z-Bolt ACAL, both of which were actually announced 2 years ago at SHOT Show. So today we're going to take a look at the Holosun IRIS, see if it really is the holy grail of the civilian IR laser aiming module market, and we're also going to take a look at some of the other nighttime adjacent accessories that Holosun announced last year that just recently came out. Let's get into it. Today's video was made possible in part by God's gift to warming layers, the Waffle Top, available from our channel sponsor, Venture Surplus. The Waffle Top is a quarter zip grid fleece designed to be worn between your modesty-preserving base layer and your wind and rain defeating outer layer. Your priorities in the winter are staying dry and warm in that order. So if you're exerting yourself and it's not wet, you can take off your rain layer to get more airflow, and the Waffle Top will still keep you warm. If you're exerting yourself and it is wet, you can remove the mid layer and keep the rain layer so you stay cooler. I think they teach you this stuff in the military, but you could also just watch one episode of Survivor Man and get the same information. Check out Venture Surplus at the link in the video description for cold weather clothing and other military surplus, and use the code provided to save 10% off your order. Thank you guys for watching the ad. Thank you to Venture for sponsoring this show. Let's get back into it. Holosun has been making IR laser aiming modules for the last several years, and their LS321 has remained the go-to entry-level LAM even in the face of new, more powerful options due to two things. It's affordable and it works. In order to get around the restrictions the FDA places on laser output, you have to either spend a ton of money, buy some unproven mystery meat jank box, or find a military laser that fell off a truck. And sometimes you have to do more than one of those things. The Holosun IRIS is intended to significantly improve upon the power output of the LS321 while staying affordable and legal for civilian sales. Did they pull it off? Yes, but you should still watch the whole video because I work very hard on them. Here it is, the Holosun IRIS 3. This is a 3-function laser aiming module. So we've got an IR illuminator, an IR designator, and a visible aiming laser all in one emitter cluster on the right side of the device. The one that Holosun sent me has the green laser. I think this will also be available with a red laser, and that's usually the one that I recommend because, first of all, it's slightly cheaper, and second of all, the aiming laser doesn't really matter that much. It's mostly for daytime zeroing and periodic confirmation of your zero. The layout of the IRIS is very similar to Holosun's other laser modules like the LS321. So we've got the battery compartment on the left side. Battery loads in from the front. We have the emitter cluster on the right side protected by Holosun's very nice thick rubber lens cap. The device is pretty much centered on the rail, so there's not a whole lot of offset on that emitter cluster. If you try to use one of these things with a fixed front sight base, you're probably going to get some splash off the front sight. All three emitters are zeroed with the same set of turrets, so you can zero the visible laser, and then you'll get a co-aligned IR laser, and the IR laser will be centered in the IR illuminator no matter what. This is an extremely compact and lightweight laser box. I don't know if you can tell in my hand how tiny it is, but compared to a D-Ball i2, it is quite a lot smaller. It also sits lower on the rail, and the i2 sat lower than the LS321, so that's a substantial reduction in footprint over the LS321. I believe Holosun gives the weight of the IRIS as 6.5 ounces, so a couple ounces lighter than the LS321. On my scale, this reads as 6 ounces with the battery installed, making it the smallest, lightest laser aiming module on the market, to my knowledge. On top of the IRIS, we have a centrally located fire button here, and we also have the focus slider. So rather than having a wheel mounted on the back like on the LS321, or just twisting the head assembly like on a D-Ball or a PEC-15, you just slide this slider back and forth. It actually has multiple detents, so it actually clicks into each individual position. It's very stiff, so you're not going to bump it accidentally. You've got sort of the ridges on either side to give you a little bit more traction to move it, and also this little rubberized divot on the top here to give you a little bit of extra traction when you're adjusting the illumination focus. Moving the illumination focus to the top of the device clears up some room on the back. One issue with the LS321 was that if you had a remote switch plugged in, it got a little bit tight back there because you had the mode select switch, the focus wheel, and the remote switch port all on the same side of the device. The IRIS has two switches on the back to control the behavior of the device. The one on the right is your on-off switch, so it goes between off, low, and high. The one on the left controls between visible laser, IR illuminator, and dual IR on the far left. This layout is a lot easier to use than on a lot of other laser aiming modules. For example, if I want to switch from dual high to dual low on the D-Ball i2, I have to remember that it's 3 clicks down, even though for some reason every time I go to do it, my brain tells me it should only be 2. Although on the D-Ball, it's because it has a mode called dual low-high, where it has a low laser and a high illuminator, and that always screws me up. With the Iris, I can virtually guarantee that you're going to leave it in dual IR mode all the time, and then you're only going to use the switch on the right to control when you have it off and when you have it in low or high mode, depending on what sort of lighting conditions you're in. The switchology of the Iris is excellent. It's also a relief that they did not stick with the prototype version that they had at SHOT last year, where they had one switch to control the power level and then a button on the back to control the modes. It's the very opposite of a tactile interface. One improvement of the Iris over the LS321 is the switch from the kind of chintzy Holosun QD lever that they used to use on their lasers and optics to a nice crossbolt. This has a recoil lug and then a crossbolt that can be tightened with a flathead screwdriver, coin, what have you. I greatly prefer this to a quick detach mount. It's not going to loosen up. It allows the device to sit a lot lower, and I cannot imagine wanting to quickly detach my laser from my gun. The last thing to touch on before we get into the performance comparisons is the remote switch port. This is crane compatible, so you can use it with the huge variety of switches that are already on the market. The Iris also includes its own switch, which has a crane plug, but actually has 2 buttons. So one of these is the momentary button, and the other one is not constant on. This is the Viz override button. So this button here works just like the fire button. You can double tap to have it stick on, otherwise it is momentary, and yes, it's true momentary. If you just barely tap it, it will not stay on. The Viz override is kind of an interesting feature. Usually when you see Viz override on laser modules, they have to have a second remote port to control the Viz override. Not so on the Iris. I'm not totally sure how they did that. I was not aware that crane plugs could send more than a binary signal. But as you can see, we are now in the IR mode. We are in dual IR low, and if I press the Viz override, we get a Viz laser. Also, if I turn the unit off completely, we can still get the Viz laser with the Viz override button. Kind of a strange feature. Holosun also recently introduced their RAID weapon light, so it would be interesting to see them produce a dual lead, dual button switch with 2 crane plugs, because the RAID weapon light tail cap actually uses a crane plug rather than like a Surefire Scout plug. So in theory, you could have a dual lead, dual button switch that actually had visible override, so the laser would turn on when the weapon light turned on, and you wouldn't need to use a triple lead switch, which is what you commonly see with Viz override setups. I don't personally have much of a use for a visible override system, but for those who are interested in it, that's kind of a cool feature. My only concern is that since the device can be turned on even when it's off, I think that must mean that there's some sort of keep awake or keep alive power being used to kind of prep the system to accept that input. So I'm a bit concerned about the possibility of parasitic drain. In my experience, laser aiming modules, if left in any sort of standby mode, will all exhibit parasitic drain, whereas ones that are turned completely off don't seem to. If the Viz override on the Iris can activate the visible laser even when it's switched fully off, it makes me think that the Iris may never truly be fully off. Anyway, let's take a look at that output. If the Iris had exactly the same performance as the LS321 in a smaller, lighter package, it would already be pretty good, but the Iris has a VCSEL-based illuminator, which results in a much brighter, cleaner illumination pattern than a civilian legal traditional laser-based illuminator like on the LS321. The illuminator power on the LS321 is rated at less than 4 milliwatts, whereas the Iris boasts an illuminator power of 60 milliwatts. Does that make it 15 times brighter than the LS321? Kinda. Comparing the on-paper output of laser, VCSEL, and LED-based illuminators doesn't really work. The LED illuminator on the D-Ball D2 is rated at 600 milliwatts, for example, versus I think 50 milliwatts for the VCSEL-based MAL C1, but they both perform pretty much the same. If we compare the Iris to my trusty old D-Ball i2, both on dual high mode, we see that the Iris is much brighter, capable of much tighter focus, and has a much more even illumination pattern. If we compare it to a full-power beige market laser, like the LaserSpeed M6TR, which is rated at 30 milliwatts on high, the Iris is not as bright. However, we still get the benefit of that clean illuminator pattern without the petri dish effect of a traditional laser. The illuminator focus on the Iris is easy to adjust on the fly and has 5 well-spaced focus levels. The 2 tightest focus levels are so narrow that they will probably only be useful with the aid of magnification, so I suspect they're intended more for use with clip-on night vision or magnified, dedicated night vision optics. If it was up to me, I'd tell the clip-on guys to take a hike and make all of the modes a bit wider. Knock that hyperfocus setting off the top of the range and add a wider flood setting below the bottom of the range for more close quarters use. The Iris does have an odd illumination artifact that appears at the tighter focus levels as a halo around the center of the beam. It's very faint, so it's hard to capture on video unless I just point the Iris at a blank wall up close. It reminds me of the way the D-Ball D2 illuminator would splash off of nearby objects, even if it appeared that the main part of the beam shouldn't be hitting them. I actually see the same thing with the VCSEL-based DIR-V. The center part of the beam is very bright and focused, but if you look closely, you also get an outer spill pattern that can reflect off of nearby objects. I think this is one way traditional laser-based illuminators might never be completely outdone by newer tech. I don't think it matters much. The reflected illumination isn't bright enough to blind you like the splash you get from an unfocused LED IR light, like a Surefire Vampire. I just got the Iris barely in time to shoot with it before leaving for SHOT Show, so obviously I don't have a ton of rounds and months of wear on it yet. I'll keep using it, but Holosun has an extremely good track record with their lasers. I don't see why the Iris should change that, and the improved mount should make it more durable than the QD mounts on all of their older lasers. Holosun has announced a lot of stuff over the last couple years, but the Iris was the main thing I was interested in. Their Raid weapon light came out recently, and it's fine. It has decent performance for the money, and the included switch and mounts are a good value. Their DRS-TH, the thermal overlay red dot sight, is a cool piece of technology, but I think it appeals primarily to hog hunters, even more than with most thermals. The Iris, however, is absolutely a winner. This is one of the best laser modules on the market right now, and that's before we even factor in price. MSRP of the Iris is right around $1,000, with retail price being a bit lower, about $900 as of this writing. MSRP of the LS321 was also $1,000, but it's been a long time since anybody paid that much for one. It's pretty common to pick up the LS321 for around $700, so the Iris is more expensive, at least for now. Even for $900, the Iris stands to kill off a lot of the rest of the civilian IR laser market. None of Steiner's lasers are worth buying over the Iris, or honestly, not even worth keeping instead of the Iris. We'll see if they have anything new at SHOT Show 2025. The 2 main competitors to the Iris that are available right now would be the 3EIR DIR-V and the LaserSpeed M6TR. The Iris is a serious threat to the M6TR. It's about the same price and has similar performance but in a smaller, lighter package from a much more well-established company. The M6TR's appeal is the raw power of an unrestricted beige market laser. The DIR-V seems like an even more obvious victim of the Iris since it lacks a lot of the usability of the Iris and costs twice as much. However, it is still extremely low profile and lightweight, making it the best laser to pair with magnified optics, unless you want to commit to the weight, bulk, and cost of a MAL C1. We are also still waiting on the release of the EOTech OGL and the Z-Bolt ACAL. Both of these promised impressive output at a reasonable price point, but 2 years after being announced, they're still not here. I'm hoping we get good news about one or both of them at SHOT Show, where I will be, probably when you're watching this video.
If you know.
Alright, thank you guys very much for watching. If you'd like to support this channel, please subscribe and check out the links in the video description. If you support me on Subscribestar, you will get access to bonus videos, early videos, and the PP-soaked heck hole we call a Discord server. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and I'll see you next time.